Hello, welcome back to the Ohio Valley Podcast number 2, featuring State Representative candidate Richard Oliveto. Make sure you go out and vote March 17th here in Ohio for the 96th District. You can get more information on Facebook. We are the 96th. You can check out the podcast on the Facebook page. Also on YouTube, search Ohio Valley Podcast on YouTube, and free downloads on the internetarchive.org. Again, search Ohio Valley Podcast. Richard, how are you?
Good, Carmen. I feel good. Looking positive, and Happy New Year.
Buon Capodanno, as we say in Italian. Richard, I have a very late Christmas joke for you.
Yeah.
How much did Santa charge for his sleigh?
I don't know.
Nothing. It was on the house.
Okay,
well.
That's pretty good.
Okay, well, this is a family show. I have to keep it clean. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so for this Ohio Valley Podcast number 2, what is the topic for today?
Environmental issues in the Valley and in the background, and some of the commitments that respective candidates may have to the environmental issues.
Okay. All right, so I live here in Steubenville, Ohio. Why should I care about the environment?
Well, of course, the Ohio Valley has had a long history of an industrial valley. It's a very deep and pivotal history, really, since the turn of the century. We all know about the steel mills and the coal and the rail, but the industrial age left a lot of while it grew this country and it grew the middle class and also helped us win a couple wars, it left behind a legacy of some very important environmental cleanups, and we're left with that legacy. So the air quality here in Ohio Valley has been under a Harvard study for 30 years because of and it's been called a cancer cluster, and that's been well documented even by local doctors. At times, even on Channel News 9, they've had some stories about that. But as far as the present pressing issues, of course, is the landfills issue, and that's what we're focused on because it's the burning issue right now.
Okay. All right, I have seen that on the news. Obviously, nobody wants dirty air or dirty land or dirty water. So if you are the nominee and if you win and you go to Columbus, what can you do for us?
One thing, first of all, just what many people are doing, and I applaud the effort of the Friends of Cross Ridge and those groups that are trying to bring and raise awareness of what's going on with Cross Ridge landfill and with Apex. The first thing you do, and what they are doing well, I believe, is you make the public aware of the issue. And you want to do that because the way these environmental landfill permits come about, it can be, whether claimed to be public hearings, they're usually held in Columbus, or they can be held in a very small group in town in the county governments or the joint Belmont County government agencies. And sometimes if there's not enough awareness, which we've already passed that with Crossridge, there's a lot of awareness of this, but in the past they can get these things approved and permitted without much of the public really knowing the risk or the environmental threats that are faced. A good thing in the Crossridge issue, it was caught before the permit process has even started. So a lot of groups, a lot of organizations, business, civil, individual citizens, and even, for instance, the educational facilities in town have all come out against not wanting to open up Crossridge to an out-of-state supplier of out-of-state garbage. So that's the first thing. But once a representative, of course, has a unique position to represent the people's interest, he or she can lobby the state EPA, also has influence over the local health department to make sure that the people's will is heard loudly in those processes, in those permitting processes, and all the way through the permitting process, not just for some reason, let's say the EPA grants a permit to an out-of-state, like they did, for instance, in Apex, near Amsterdam, in Scioto County. What happens then is there's a whole entire environmental regulatory system that kicks in, and a lot of times that isn't paid attention to. A state representative has a lot of ability to bring those inter-government agencies into line with the law. In other words, we become sort of like a mini enforcer of the awareness of what the people want. sometimes it's happened, and sometimes it hasn't happened. But I would think that the people's representative would want to express the people's will. And when you're representing 40, 60, 80,000 people or more, and you're telling a state agency that this county or this population region doesn't want this, or they want it to be regulated in a certain way, it brings a little bit more fine-tuning to their agency.
Okay, I was going to ask you, how do we make a landfill safe? And part of that is balanced regulation?
Yes. Regulatory systems, like I've spoken before, are critical, and this is what flies in the face of what's kind of going on the national level. There's been a lot of talk by the present administration and those that really were the architects of the policies that led to the idea that all regulations are bad, or we want to deregulate America's industry so we can take off the shackles, so to speak. Well, if you deregulate any given industry, let's say you deregulate Wall Street, you're going to end up with a collapse like we saw in 2008.
Yeah.
If you deregulate out-of-state garbage facilities and landfills, there will be contractors that will take great advantage of whatever they can do with the environment. So regulations include governing what they call the leachate, or the drainage that comes off of a solid waste landfill.
Yeah.
The odors that Apex neighbors and many people throughout Jefferson County, Harrison County have been faced with. The odors can be overwhelming, and they can also be toxic.
Yeah.
And so regulations to the groundwater supplies, to the streams, to just how they actually execute the actual physical landfill itself. And there's been a lot of reported violations at Apex, for instance. And I know the citizens out there have been fighting that for years, and they have some very bitter experiences. But I'm glad to see that it's back on. Crossridge, in a lot of ways, has also brought Apex back up in the public view, in the media view. And I would strongly support the citizens who are wanting more oversight, wanting Apex to get into compliance with the state environmental laws and federal environmental laws. And the same thing goes for Crossridge. I'm against permitting Crossridge to open to an out-of-state contractor. If somehow it would happen, then we have to fight real hard to make sure that every regulatory criteria is met and every hurdle is kept in place. So if they do get a permit, which I hope they don't, but if they do, we have to be the citizens' watchdog, and I promise to do that as an elected official.
So just to be clear, it is possible to have a clean or cleaner landfill?
Well, it's a debate, and there are landfills all over the country. There's municipal landfills, of course, in major cities, but I wouldn't want to go on record to say out-of-state toxic landfills are good ideas. I would just say it's important to have the highest and most strict regulations of any toxic waste site, and that's what it becomes. It becomes a toxic waste site, so you must have very stringent EPA and other environmental regulations over such sites. A good example is what happened with the Saddlewood plant, and that's also coming up now in Jefferson County. Saddlewood was a plant that produced a certain type of metal and bearings, and when it closed, it left a mountain, or a mini mountain, or a large deposit that people could see from driving near it, of pure white substances. And for many years, young people were even doing four-wheelers up the side of that white, quote-unquote, hill along Golds. And it turns out the white substance is chromium, hexavalent chromium. It's the exact same substance that Julia Roberts played Erin Brockovich. It's the exact same.
In that movie, yeah.
It causes cancer. It causes birth defects. It's extremely carcinogenic. There's a near mini mountain of it in Jefferson County. It's a Superfund site. It was designated a Superfund site.
Yeah.
It has been contracted finally to be removed, but it's been 20 years there, and it's been leaching into the rivers and streams. So Jefferson County has a major Superfund site already, and that's why how it was overlooked and how that was closed down, and while that Superfund site was allowed to exist with that kind of substance right down the street is very, very much part of the process of why regulations are important. At the same time, what was the process that allowed that to go on like that for so long? So citizen involvement, citizen awareness, citizen groups, environmental is all part of the necessary action. And if I may digress for a minute, I was involved. People say, "Well, Richard, you're coming to the party a little bit late." Well, in 1990 and 92, I became involved with probably the biggest environmental issue ever in Eastern Ohio, if not Ohio at the time. And it was designated that by the Ohio Attorney General, Lee Fisher at the time, that it was the biggest environmental issue in Ohio. And that was WTI up in East Liverpool, which was, again, a waste incinerator, which was sited near a elementary school, 500 feet from an elementary school. And I became one of the attorneys that was involved with representing the citizens that were fighting against that permitting in that location, and just being there for the ability to give advice and consent to the advocates that were fighting that. Alonzo Spencer and I became very close friends. Terry Swearigan was named one of the top 50 people in the country by Time Magazine as a result of that. And I was very close to Terry and very close to Alonzo. Alonzo was a lifetime friend. Al Gore came into the area and sent people from Washington to help, again, process that. Unfortunately, they got their permit. It opened. There's been a lot of problems ever since, but Alonzo Spencer and a committed group of individuals have fought to make sure those regulations and those permitting issues have been at least given close scrutiny by the public. But I was there in 91 and 92. In fact, Swearigan always credited me with bringing the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and I had a close friend. And the Cleveland Plain Dealer did 80 front page articles on WTI, which netted national news. And the person that came and did those articles won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting.
Oh, wow.
So Terry always said my greatest contribution wasn't necessarily being a lawyer. It was just having them get attention. And the media is critical. Media attention is critical to any citizens group. So I felt, it was interesting because I learned a lot about real issues in terms of permitting, EPA control, and citizen advocacy from Terry and Alonzo. They were tremendous environmental, and many other people who gave up. There were families, children came out, entire families were on the picket lines, and we want to call them picket lines. And National Guard. People don't realize that one night the National Guard were called out because this is right before the facility was being constructed, and the citizens lined up with children in their arms on a foggy night. I'll never forget it. And the National Guard was called to protect the facility, and they had their bayonets on their live ammunition in their M16s or M4s. And there was a line that stretched about 100 yards of National Guardsmen with bayonets fixed, and right 2 to 3 feet from those bayonets were equally a line of citizens, and it was a very, very tense slide. And anything could have happened.
Right.
And I sensed the growing tension between the two sides, as particularly some of the young guardsmen. And kind of being a student of history, I thought of Kent State. And a mistake could set this off. And there were literally parents holding infants in their arms. Feet away from a fixed bayonet weapon. And what I did that night, it was a decision I just made intuitively. I saw the moment, and Terry would later make a joke with me, but I walked down that line. I walked right down between the two, and I walked myself, and it seemed like it diffused the tension. And everybody was sort of amazed that I would take that walk, but I felt there was too much risk. Some of the advocates were like, "Richard, you should have let the tension grow," and I said I just couldn't see children being hurt possibly. And
Right.
I think even the National Guard felt relief because the tension, there was rocks being thrown, there were epithets being stated, and humans have a great capacity,
Yeah.
especially trained soldiers, but anything could happen.
One mistake.
And so I just felt there could be a flashpoint, and I took that walk and I survived it, and so did everybody else.
Okay.
Terry saw me afterwards, and she kind of chided me. She says, "Why did you do that, Richard?"
Yeah.
But that was my moment of comeuppance.
I did not know that. Well, obviously, there's a lot more to talk about, so I think we'll just wrap this up for now for this Ohio Valley podcast number 2, featuring state representative candidate for the 96th district in Ohio. That would be Richard Oliveto. Again, March 17th is the primary. And don't forget to get out there and vote for the man who definitely has the background, for sure has the qualifications to represent us. All right, so once again, it is We Are the 96th on Facebook, on the internet, archive.org. Again, it's Ohio Valley Podcast. It's now on YouTube in video format for Ohio Valley Podcast. The GoFundMe site is also to contribute. We Are the 96th. And I believe Richard has an email if you would like to ask him a question directly through email. And that email is?
mccr1983@gmail.com.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you sneak peek on the next topic for the next podcast, or shall we wait?
Well, I would just say that I am concerned about the opiate crisis, and I think we ought to
Good one.
that.
Yeah. So am I.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, there you go. Maybe next time we'll talk about the opioid crisis, not just here, where we live, but really in all 50 states now. It seems a growing problem.
And among all socioeconomic groups,
Right.
Anybody and all
Right.
families are affected.
Okay.
And it affects all of us because of
Yeah.
what's happening in
Sure.
our country.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. All right. We'll catch you on the next one for the Ohio Valley Podcast, number 3. So on that note, I'll just say arrivederci.